Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this new series, In the Spotlight, with me, Seamus Corry, Wellbeing Consultant, Mental Health Practitioner. This series is a little bit different, and for those of you who've been following my series up to now, yes, I've been focused on wellbeing. I will soon be focusing on mental health matters, but today I thought of focusing in the spotlight on a group of very special people in my life who influence me, inspire me, and help me to do better. Wake me up really to my purpose and mission and vision in life, which is to do good for humanity. And I have the great pleasure and privilege of introducing to you today, and you will not want to miss this episode. So if you've not already subscribed and followed, please subscribe and follow on Spotify and on YouTube. I'd like to welcome today an individual to the show who, in my opinion, mimics that mission-driven purpose and drive to wake up humanity to its true purpose, to do good, to do good. He is a former USAF veteran, founder, former banker. He's a husband, chairman, founder of a global network. He is an author, to mention just a few of his titles, but to me, he's just one amazing individual, a true inspiration to me as an entrepreneur and to many entrepreneurs, grassroots social entrepreneurs around the world. I'd like to welcome today Dennis Pitocco to this show. Dennis, you're very welcome to In the Spotlight this afternoon.
Seamus, thank you so much for inviting me. I know it's been an adventure for you and I to come together because I'm based in Tampa, Florida normally, but I happen to be in your country for the next month or so. So I'm just thrilled we could finally get together. And thank you for your kind words. As I've said to you before this, I have been blessed to travel a really remarkable road of rediscovering humanity. And I believe in synchronicity, and that is exactly why you and I are talking today. We were bound to intersect at some point. It was just a matter of when. And now we know the power of two.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for those who are listening to you today, Dennis, I know a little bit about you, and I have the privilege of joining your own network and global organization as a contributor, and I'm honored to be that. But for those of you who don't know you, Dennis, would you like firstly to share a little bit about you as it's your spotlight, Dennis, and tell the world a
Oh,
little bit
thanks.
about yourself?
Well, you already touched upon some of my background. I spent years and years in the banking business, traveling the world, opening businesses around the world. I happened to meet my wife over here in England, which is why I'm back. We visit her family once a year over here. I was in the Air Force, served my country for a few years, and after doing a whole bunch of good stuff, I finally I was lucky enough to sell my business here in the UK, meet my wife. We got married, went back to Tampa Bay, and then we were in an unusual position, Seamus, which very few people are, and that is at a relatively young age, we had the opportunity to make choices. And what I mean by that, there's that old analogy of, the dog that's always chasing the car. Well, we caught the car. Now, what do you do with it? We had choices. We could figure out how we wanted to spend the rest of our lives together. We had done well enough economically that we could make those kind of choices. And we really held that as quite a responsibility. We took a lot of long walks back then. This goes back about 14 years ago. And we walked and we talked and we got away from all the social media noise and everything else and said, how do we want to spend our time? We ended up making three choices. And it took a while to get there, and we've been perfecting them ever since. The first thing we said is we want to travel. We had both done a lot of travel business-wise, like many people do, but typical business travel is you get off the airplane, you go into taxi, you get into the meeting room, you leave. I can tell you, I visited a gazillion countries when I was traveling for banking, but I didn't really see anything other than meeting rooms. So, and my wife had the same experience because she was in a similar business here in Europe. And so we said, we're going to travel intentionally. And what's that mean is we're going to forget about the USA for just a minute. We want to go see the rest of the world so we can develop a better perspective on the rest of the world, on other cultures, and on our own country. So we started mapping out the world, and we've been traveling intentionally ever since then. The second thing we wanted to do is we wanted to give back. Now, a lot of people talk about giving back, and typically it's writing a check. And we said, yeah, we'll do that, of course, but we wanted to roll up our sleeves and truly make a difference. We started out by volunteering for the International Red Cross, and our only condition was we would go anywhere in the world to help during any disaster, but we always go together. We did that for a while. And then we started getting hands-on involved in local nonprofits in Tampa Bay, where we live, and went on to delivering meals and serving meals to the homeless. And my wife volunteered in the office. I became chairman of the board and we learned a whole bunch about the nonprofit business. And we decided we're going to get deeper. So we ultimately launched another venture, which I'll come back to later. It's called GoodWorks 360. The third thing we decided was we got to keep your brain active. Everybody talks about retiring, and now what do you do? And how do you stay sharp? Do you do crossword puzzles? Do you play Sudoku? I don't know. So I said to my wife one day, actually, it was here in England, we were sitting at her sister's table, and I said, I'm going to launch a website, but I don't want it to be any typical website. I want to be the kind of website that I wouldn't mind visiting. And my wife said to me, "You've got no technology background." And I said, "Absolutely right." So it's not going to be order a website and have it delivered to me. It's going to be build it from scratch, learn how to do it, make every mistake in the book, and never feel obligated that what I put on that site was there because of marketing or a board of directors. I want to put good stuff on it. Now, let me tell you, Seamus, I had no idea what I was doing. But we did it. We launched it, and now today, it's 13 years later, 13th anniversary of the
Oh,
website.
wow.
We've grown well beyond our expectations. We've got 1,200 writers around the world, and it just keeps expanding. So I can go on and on and on, but that kind of brings you up to where we are right now.
Wow, Dennis, what a story. And listen, can I be the first to congratulate you on your 13th anniversary since launching
Oh,
the
thank you.
website? It's absolutely amazing.
Thank
Together,
you.
your chief inspiration officer, Ali, who I know walks by your side and is equally a force for good in terms of the work that you do. Wait, Dennis, can I ask a very personal question?
Sure.
What drives you, Dennis? Where does your drive come from?
You know, I've been asked that question a lot, particularly in recent years, because I'm going to go backwards a little bit. The ethos behind what we do at 360 Nation, it's from day one, it's been let's rediscover humanity at its best. Now, that was our mission, our vision, whatever you want to call it. And we were walking that talk. And it's been a hard climb because there's been a lot of pushback and, naysayers and, the challenges around the world have kind of worked against or conspired against this notion. But then every so often, I'll have a conversation. It might be with someone like you. It might be with one of our writers. It might be with somebody just coming to the website to tell us how much they appreciate what we're doing. And that is the flame that reignites what we're doing. Because just when you think, this is exhausting, we're human beings, we're climbing this hill. Somebody reaches out their hand through a word or a deed, and I turn to my wife and said, "That's why we do this. This is our fire that keeps us going." There was a quote by Rumi I came to some years ago. It said, "Set your life on fire, seek those who fan your flames." We don't go seeking people, they come to us.
Yeah,
And when they ask questions like, "Dennis, what do you mean by rediscover humanity?" I said, "My goodness, that's my cue." So we've gotten more and more encouragement on the tougher days from people like you and others who just say, "Wow, can I have more of what you're doing?" And so we
absolutely.
dig deeper, we reach farther, we find other ways to get the message out, and that encourages us.
Absolutely. And Dennis, never more needed in our world today than today, right? Because we live in a very polarized, very divided world where, it's black or white, it's up or down, it's yes or no, it's blue or red, and you guys in terms of the United States have have a huge decision in play, in a week's time. And I read,
Yeah.
I was watching the BBC News. There are other news stations available, but I was watching the BBC News, and really, it comes down to a choice between authoritarianism and democracy, right?
Yeah.
That's the choice that the American nation is faced with, and what a choice! Where did we get to that in society? Where did we get to that in community? How how has
It's
it, how
it,
has it gone so wrong, Dennis? And how can we make it right?
well, it's interesting because I'm going to go backwards again. We've been on this uphill climb on rediscovering humanity, but about 6 months ago, we came to the conclusion, it's one thing to rediscover it. It's another thing to explore it more deeper. And we felt like, we've got this giant, what they call bully pulpit. I've got this microphone to the world that we can get our messages out, whether it be by Zoom gatherings or whether it be by writing. So I started doing something, Seamus, that I haven't done intentionally for a long time. I started writing, but I started writing differently. And here's what I mean by that. We have we're lucky enough to have a platform that we can message out. With that comes a responsibility, not just to nudge people, but to challenge people.
Mm.
So we started a series of articles where I'm going out to the world now and saying, wait a minute, Seamus. Yeah, I know you disagree with Joe and Jim and all that, but let's talk about how you disagree. Let's talk about the skills you need to agree to disagree. So we're getting a little more bold in our rediscovery humanity because what I learned is people are curious. They don't, let me back up. When you and I went to school, regardless of where we went to school, we went through all the normal classes, we graduated, we may have gone to college, we may not. But where in your life are you taught how to listen? And I mean listen intentionally. And I mean listen even though you disagree. Where are you taught not to debate everything and stand on what we call in America your high horse? So we started developing a list of what we call lower the temperature list, we call it. And it's skills that you need I can speak to Seamus, and Seamus and I may be on the opposite sides, whether it be politically, religiously, wherever we're on, but I can disarm that conversation by starting with just one thing. And I'll just give you a hint. There's a lot, but just one thing, Seamus. If I could say to you after you said something that I thought was just so absurd, I said, Seamus, I don't necessarily agree with you, but help me understand how you got there. Now, my problem is I'm curious. I'm going to listen. My job is to shut up and let you tell me how you got there. And then when you're done, Seamus, I'm going to dig a little deeper. I'm not reloading my own thinking. I'm taking on your thinking.
Yeah.
And after doing that back and forth, when the conversation's over, we may still disagree intellectually, but you and I are going to be closer as friends or as human
That's true.
beings because I listened to you. And now, and frankly, whenever I've done that, and I've practiced that a lot, because these days, as you've said, there's a lot of that going around. I've always walked away saying, wait a minute, I never looked at things that way. It doesn't mean I've changed my mind, but I'm a little bit smarter because of that. So that's just one example where we're now going out and testing and developing and sharing the skills you need because we weren't taught how to do that. And we can't expect people to immediately just soften their position. We have to give them some tools to do it. And it's been received very well.
Oh, incredibly so. And on that, I love the position that you've taken, instead of presenting people to the world with the Instead Talks 360, and
Yes.
how 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 that conversation can take place. You mightn't necessarily agree with what's being said, but at least people can enter into a conversation rather than
Yes.
speaking about other networks where it's very monolithic, it's very,
Yeah.
one-sided. You speak, people listen. You're instead talk 360 model seems to work really well, and
Well,
I can
thank
share
you.
that because of it. I've experienced that, and I was part of
Well,
that series.
thank you very much. What we're trying to do is exactly what you're doing right now. It's not a presentation, it's a conversation.
Yeah,
And then you see where that take you. And I've said to so many people, it's like rolling a tennis ball in onto a table, and it just keeps bouncing in different directions because you don't know where the conversation is going to go. But we all walk away saying, boy, I know that person a little bit better. So we intentionally structure those discussions, again, instead Talks 360 as what we call a conversation, not a presentation. And we challenge the audience and we invite the audience to join the discussion. And again, it was keyed off the fact of TED Talks, which I think TED Talks are great. We love them. We listen to them. We publish them, but they're lacking a two-way conversation
yeah.
where I think whoever's speaking would love to get some feedback from the audience, and the audience would love to be curious. So we're just trying to create more ways that your voice and other voices can get out there in a divided world.
I love that. I love that, and uh, 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 sometimes it feels as if humanity is continents apart from its own existence, right? Because the way it seems to me, and the way I certainly am aware about, us as a human species. We're tenants in this world, right? We don't own the world. We don't own the property in which we live in. We're
Yep.
tenants, right? We have a landlord that we'll be beholden to, and our responsibility is to look after the property that we find ourselves in. But instead, Dennis, we find ourselves trashing the property that we're living in, right?
Yeah, we're just passing through. You're right. And wow, but we're passing through with the opportunity to leave it better than we found it.
Yeah,
But so we soldier on, as you would say over here in the UK. We just dig deeper and we keep we just keep fighting the good fight.
yeah, and
But
and and it's one conversation at a time, Dennis, isn't it?
exactly.
It's one conversation at a time. You said it beautifully before we hit record. It's we create ripples. It's called the butterfly effect. If one person listens to what you and I are speaking about today and engages in the conversation, or maybe just ever so slightly, changes their outlook ever so slightly, or changes their opinion ever so slightly, then that's where the conversation can start, right?
Right, and we won't even know some of the lives we've touched.
No.
I've said to many of our writers who focus on what you and I are talking about, I said, you may not get a comment, you may not even get a like, but don't think that you haven't given people food for thought. And maybe they're not ready to step up yet because it's a tough battle sometimes going against the flow.
Yeah.
But just keep on doing it because you are changing lives. And then people start to say, wait a minute, I'm not alone. And if that person can do more good, maybe I can do more good. And then you've got to simplify. I'm going to go off on a tangent here a little bit. As we're going up this climb, I call it the climb of rediscovering Manhattan Road, I took for something for granted that I shouldn't have taken for granted. And what that was is I assumed unfairly that people knew what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Somebody came to me not long ago and they said, Dennis, I really like what you folks stand for, and I really want to do more good, but I'm not sure how to do it. I don't know exactly what you mean. And I said to my wife, wow, that was a nice comment to come in. So what we did, and I can share this separately somehow over to you if you'd like. Um, we sat down and said, all right, it's time to do more good around the world. If I needed a roadmap, what would I put on that roadmap? I wrote an article. This is one of the first of these articles in this new series, and it's the entire article. In fact, it was titled "Shared Humanity: Time to Do More Good," and I listed literally over 4 dozen things that you and I could do individually, and it's simple stuff. It's just, be more authentic, be more appreciative, be kinder. And then I give examples of that. And one of the best examples I can give you is, somebody said, well, yeah, I want to do more, but, so here's what you can do. When you and I stop talking, not before we go to lunch, before you check that next email, just stop what you're doing for a minute, sit back, think of somebody you know in your world. Could be a friend, it could be a senior citizen in particular, people that are kind of shut into their world. Pick up the phone and call them. And if that was you, Seamus, and I just pick up the phone, I may be your only point of contact that day because maybe you are on your own. Maybe you don't have a lot of interface. Maybe you're worried about the world. And when you call that person, here's the discussion. Seamus, just checking in to see how you're doing. How are you? And then shut up and listen and let that person tell you how they're doing. You may have changed their life remarkably, and there's no motivation behind the call. You don't want anything. It's amazing how many conversations where people reach out to you, but there's always something they need. Call without a need other than to make their lives better. Now, that may sound so simplistic, but my wife and I have done that, in a quiet time. Let's call somebody. And it could be a relative you haven't spoken to in years. And boy, it just lights up life. So the list is over, again, 4 dozen items, but that's just one example. And when the people start to think about saying, wow, that is pretty easy, let me try that. And then it becomes contagious. And then you tell that story to somebody else of how you changed somebody's life that day. And you're just saying to somebody in not so many words, Seamus, you matter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It just reminds me so much of my dad.
Huh.
God rest him. It reminds me so much of my dad. My dad used to be a mailman. He was a mailman for 42 years. I worked in a rural community in Ireland, and he was not only a mailman, Dennis, but he was a connector and facilitator for conversations because as he delivered mail, he would literally check in on people as he went, and
Yep.
the further and deeper he went into rural communities, the more isolated, for example, older people were in those communities, and like you say, my dad was the only person that person saw that day.
And what he did, and you know this, it was less about the mail. It was more about somebody showing up that day, and
Yeah,
I'm going to get up and I'm going to get dressed. I'm going to get ready because your father was coming. And it's a knock at the door. It's a well-being check. It's how are you? And it may be even a cup of tea for all we know, but what a difference that makes.
absolutely, and I had the privilege of sharing some of that on summer breaks and when I broke from school and stuff, and I had the privilege of going on these rounds with him when I was a child, and I saw the difference. I saw the real difference that his presence made to those people in their lives at that moment in time. It was truly incredible, Dennis. Truly incredible.
Well, well, your father could model exactly what we're talking about, and it's just that simple. Now, maybe you can't knock on a door, but you can pick up the phone.
You can pick
And
up
you
the
might
phone.
be easier to text or to do a call. No, let's just pick up the phone. Just do it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely. Do it today, ladies and gentlemen. Do it today. If you're listening to this, pick up the phone,
right.
phone somebody that you haven't been in contact with for a wee while. Check in with them, ask them how they are, and then shut up, right? Let them speak.
Yes. Shut up, listen, and then tell other people what you've done and tell them the impact you've had, and maybe they'll do the same.
Absolutely. I want to ask Dennis, um, you know, your global drive and your global mission and global vision is to do good, right?
Yes.
For humanity, to rediscover the best of humanity, rediscover, as you say yourself, humanity at its very best. And that takes time. And that takes
Mm.
time and mission and vision and drive and purpose. And, it means also, and I love the fact that for you, you've always been a bit of a risk taker, right? You've always
Yes.
you've always been a risk taker because my understanding is, in you taking those risks, that's where real life happens, right? It's not in the
Oh, absolutely.
it's not in the comfort zone, but it's actually stepping outside of ourselves a little bit and maybe going or stepping where we've not stepped before, right?
Amen. Funny when I was in my banking career, and I got into banking not because I wanted to be a banker when I grew up, quite the contrary, but I was in the Air Force. I came from a family of eight we were raised in Pittsburgh. My father worked three jobs. There was no hope of college or university, as you might call it. So I and my four brothers, one at a time, we joined the armed forces. As I joined the Air Force, spent my time there. When I got out, there was the Air Force had a placement program where they would find a job for you
Hmm.
that they thought you might be interested. Well, they discharged me in Philadelphia. They got me a job at the lowest level position you could have in a bank. Now, what's interesting about that, again, I'm coming into a bank. I've got an Air Force background, but no college degree. And I'm starting to work with other guys that have all these credentials. I learned a few years into that, I don't want to necessarily be a banker, but there's an opportunity here if I just, as we say in America, kick ass, bear down, be the guy that's always working harder, working longer. Raise your hand when they need somebody to go somewhere. And I started jumping off those cliffs, call it risk. And I was going anywhere, going across the country. They knew they could come to Dennis. Now, I had no idea um, how that would come back to help me later on because it got to the point years into that where it wasn't about education. It wasn't about how many certificates you had on the wall. It was about the guy that they knew they could go to. And little by little, I climbed the ladder into the executive ranks. Now, that would be hard to do these days, but back then, Seamus, hard work was noticed.
Yeah.
Commitment was noticed. And jumping off that cliff when you weren't even sure there was water down there, but you figure, I'll jump. What's the worst that could happen? I'm going to splash. And that's where my risk taking began, frankly, because I'd like to tell you that was a life plan. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's work, right?
it worked. Yes. Yes, it did, as a matter of
Yeah.
fact. So,
And work for good. I'd like to speak briefly about, if I may, an interesting journey you took last year, I believe. And you did a pilgrimage, a wonderful pilgrimage,
oh,
uh, El Camino de Santiago. And tell us a little bit about that. How was that for you, Dennis? How was that to break free of?
it was, well, it was absolutely positively life changing. If somebody said to my wife and I, what was the biggest pivot you have ever made in your life? That was literally, well, less than 6 months ago because we walked the Camino de Santiago. For those that don't know about it, it's a 500-mile pilgrimage across it starts in France and goes right into Spain. And it took us about 6 weeks. And we, wow, it changed our lives for good. And here's what I mean by that.
Mm.
First of all, we're blessed to be able to spend 6 weeks away from everything. Somebody said to me, wait a minute, you run this big media thing. You can't just stop and disconnect. I said, we're going to do that for two reasons. Number one, I learned a long time ago that self-care isn't selfish, and I had to be told that. Second of all, we've seen too many people on social media talk about unplugging. And we published their articles. Some of them don't even write for us. They just talk about it. But who really does that? I said, if we can disconnect for 2 months, no matter whether we're walking in the Camino or if we can do it, we're walking our talk, number one. And second of all, um, people will see the possibilities. So we disconnected for 2 months. We spent a long time thinking, talking. We're walking for hours in the hills of Spain, Seamus. Nothing around us, just the two of us, except nature the way it used to be. We're walking through vineyards. Wow, we're going into deep discussions. My wife and I have been together 18 years. Do you think, and we spend all of our time together because of what we do. But sometimes you feel like those conversations don't go deep enough. Well, as I said to many people, once we were about 2 weeks into the Camino walk, I'd gotten rid of every post-it note that was stuck in my brain, all the business stuff you think about. And then my wife and I started going deeper into our discussions in terms of what's important, any life-changing things we need to talk about before we come back. And it went on and on and on. And we came back to that. And I don't know. We just remodeled the way we approach life, everything from the way we do our business, if you want to call this a business. We reevaluated relationships. We slowed down on the relationships that were no longer authentic. We sped up on the relationships that were authentic because we wanted to pare down uh, the size of our personal and professional community so we could invest more time in those people that were genuine friends. And wow, it's been life-changing ever since. And that's what, then when I said months ago, I started writing more, I started being more present. That's what I mean by that. I wanted to share some of those lessons with the rest of the world. And it's been just a remarkable ride. I could go on and on. In fact, it's gotten to the point now where I wrote an article when I came back because people said, you have to tell us more about it. So I wrote an article, it was about, I don't know, 2,000 words. And I said to my wife, I can't condense this life-changing experience into 2,000
Because of
words.
words.
So
Yeah.
I'm now doing what I said I would never do. I'm writing a book about it. And we made 35 stops across the entire walk, and I've got 35 chapters outlined, and I'm starting to work on it now. Part of it's for us because we don't want to miss the legacy, because, as time passes, you forget some of the stories. And part of it's for the people that are curious, and they say, well, maybe we want to do a walk like that. Maybe it won't be the same walk, but we want to know more about what you learned. And I'm dying to share that with the world. But it was just a remarkable, and it was a privilege to be able to do that because how many people can check out for 6 weeks?
I know. Absolutely. Absolutely. And isn't that what a pilgrimage is about? I think a pilgrimage serves two purposes. One, it allows you to drop stuff along the way that's
Oh,
no longer
oh,
important. But it also allows you, I think, secondly, to pick up stuff that you've maybe missed out
absolutely.
on.
That came up during the pilgrimage. We talked to a lot of people along the way. We walked alone, but we did interface with people in the evenings.
Mm,
And it's not so much what you're looking for, it's about what you want to leave behind. And then
yeah,
I stumbled upon a quote, and I can't attribute to anybody, but I put it in the article, and it was, maybe the journey isn't so much about becoming anything. Maybe it's about unbecoming everything that isn't really you, so you can then become who you were meant to
to
be. I
be.
said, wow, that defines what happened to us. It was 40 days, it was 500 miles, and my wife will remind me it was 1.3 million steps on her stepper.
Yes.
We walked, we talked, we laughed, we cried, we prayed, we witnessed nature at its very best. People died on the journey, which is not unusual, but it strips you down to your bare essentials, and you really, as they say, sometimes you got to be down on your knees before you look up. That's what happened there, Seamus. We were down on our knees in a positive way, in a joyful way. And we looked up and said, wow, we need to hold on to this when we get off the trail. I truly, truly miss what I call uh, this, just the silence, the absolute silence. I called it the symphony of silence in the article because when you can hear a pin drop. Where do you find that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that mimics life, really, doesn't it, Dennis? Where I suppose for you and I, and for us as like-minded individuals and as part of a like-minded community, we're all to some degree on a pilgrimage, aren't we?
We are absolutely, and sometimes you don't know it, but sometimes something, unfortunately, something has to happen. It could have been the pandemic. It could be somebody close to you passing away, where you stop for a minute, Shane, and you say, "Wow, what's really important?" And I know we hear that a lot, but then do we just go back to our? I hate to call this, not meant to sound critical. Do we go back to our robotic existence, or we say, "Wait a minute, that could have been me"? And it's the old story, what would you write in your own for your own funeral?
Mm.
What would you want people to say about you if you were writing the script? So take a moment, put that down, and use that as your own personal roadmap because it's never too late to pivot. And you don't have to go off on a six week, journey like we did. You can stop right now and say, good point there. Let me compare the life I'm living to the roadmap that I just wrote, and let me write my own funeral speech or whatever I want chiseled onto that tombstone.
Wow. Dennis. I cannot wait. I cannot wait for the book to come out. You've sold a copy to me already, right? Let's just say I'm on Amazon. I will wait with bated breath for that book to come out, mate. I cannot wait for that book to come out. As somebody, as you know, who grew up in the Catholic tradition, I'm very familiar with pilgrimage. I'm very familiar with
Oh, I'm
spirituality.
sure you are.
And I'm very familiar with the Camino del Santiago. I've never done it, but I have done Lourdes. I have been to Lourdes, which is in itself for me a very incredible experience. And I found there, if I'm being briefly honest with you, I found myself I left more behind than I did, take on some stuff, um, which which uh, which the lessons of which I'm still learning today, the lessons of which stay with me, the experiences of which will
Same
stay
here.
with me, you know.
We're still learning from it, Seamus, and our biggest challenge is making sure we don't let go of those lessons. Because once you get back into the noisy world versus the symphony of silence, you can almost fall back into the same routines. And we are taking inventory with each other all the time and saying, wait a minute, that doesn't fit with the model anymore. And so you got to stay focused.
As Chief Reimaginator of BizCatalyst, and as part of your global mission and drive. If somebody was listening today, Dennis, somebody was listening to this show this afternoon, somebody listening to your wonderful stories and powerful passion and vision and mission. What is the one thing? What is the one thing you would recommend people to do and need to do today to make a difference?
Well, remember, you and I have actually touched upon this, call it the butterfly effect, calling it doing one kind action. There's another quote. I gravitate towards quotes a lot because I think there's so many people out there that
Yeah.
can say things so much better in one sentence. And there's a guy out there that you and I both named. His name was Gandhi. And he said, in a gentle way, we can shake the world. Now, I've grabbed onto that because that's saying you and I can make a difference. And stop hitting the snooze button on making a difference. Start focusing on what matters. You can say, yeah, that was great. Dennis and Seamus talked, and that was neat. And I'm going to move back to what I do. No, stop. Make that phone call. Stop. Take that inventory. Be intentional. And it sounds like a challenge, but it's amazing. I've seen people do it, including ourselves, and it becomes contagious. Because you say, wow, look at the difference I just made in that person's life through an act of kindness, through a phone call. And then you want to do more. And it's that old adage we've heard for many years, you get more than you give. I can confirm that.
Yeah.
You do
Likewise.
get more, but you got to start and you got to take the snooze button off and say, I'm just going to start doing it right now. And if we can get anybody listening to this today to do that, then it's worth every minute invested. We've been privileged to be able to become who we are. And we just want to share that with the world.
Absolutely, and likewise, and I'm right with you, my friend. Right, I walk the road beside you. I walk the path beside you every step of the way. Dennis, it's been a real privilege to have you on board today. It's been a real privilege, and I thank you sincerely for taking the time out of your vacation time to speak to us this afternoon. Um, Links to Dennis's work, his life, his biography, his organization will be available in the show notes. Please, if you're listening to this today, link with this guy, connect with this guy, connect with his organization if you feel you really want to make a difference and wake up to the humanity at its best. Dennis, thank you ever so much today, and thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Seamus. As you said, reach out to us. We will respond because we do walk our talk. So please, I'd love to hear from anybody.
Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate it. And have a great rest of the holiday, Dennis.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye bye.